Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the work session for Tuesday, June 16th, 2026 for the Marion City Council. First on the agenda for this work session is a presentation from the Corridor Metropolitan Planning Organization. Liz here with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. As you mentioned, my name is Liz Berg. I'm from the Corridor Metropolitan Planning Organization, here to give you kind of an overview of the MPO. So MPOs are required in areas with more than 50,000 people, and the purpose is to coordinate regional cooperation on various transportation issues. We have a policy board that kind of operates as our city council, made up of representatives from all of our member communities. And then we serve to plan various planning documents for regional transportation planning, involving all the stakeholders and the public. And then program federal funding, which a lot of it's from federal gas tax revenue. And our MPO programs them to road, trail, and transit projects. So this is our planning area. And the 8 member communities that make up the MPO are Cedar Rapids, Marion, Robbins, Hiawatha, Palo, Fairfax, Ely, and areas of unincorporated Linn County. So we get, the MPO gets money, 80% of our funding for administrative tasks comes from the federal government to coordinate transportation planning. The 20% match comes from our member communities. As you can see, Marion has several major transportation connections to the different entities in our area. Business 151 and Highway 100 with Cedar Rapids, Tower Terrace, connections to Robbins and Hiawatha, as well as the county. Several connections with Linn County, Highway 13, 151. And folks don't just live in one community, they may work in another, shop in another. So that's why that coordinated planning is necessary to enhance connectivity, reduce bottlenecks, and just overall improve access to jobs and services. So I mentioned transportation planning is our major focus. So we have 2 major planning documents, the long-range transportation plan, and funding from that flows into our transportation improvement program, which is kind of similar to a CIP. And I'll talk about how the funding flows on the next slide. And then we also provide other various services, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. So the funding flows from all the projects that any of the communities have in mind from now for the next 25 years. Could be sidewalks, could be bridge repair, and then any project that's on the non-local system, so the regional system, makes it into our plan, the long-range transportation plan. And then we project out our budget for the next 25 years. And those projects are sorted by priority into what we can afford. And then projects can be applied for from that pot of money for our TIP, which is what I mentioned is kind of like our CIP. Marion has several projects in the pipeline right now. Right now, about 6.5 million in federal funding for a total of 9 million is in various projects. 7th Avenue, the Loop Core Bridge, 15th Street, Safe Routes to School project, and a bus stop project. Previous projects completed with MPO funding include the various phases of CMAR, the bridge over Marion Boulevard, Tower Terrace, the 10th Avenue side paths. And then I mentioned projects that are eligible for that CIP type of money to apply for. So right now in our plan, the Tower Terrace Bridge, the Grand Avenue Trail, and the Highway 13 separated crossing are projects that are in our plan that are eligible for federal funding through the MPO. Some of our additional projects that we work on, right now we're just getting started on a trail plan. We're hoping that will serve as an update to Marion's trail plan, as well as the other communities that are part of the MPO. We have a travel demand model, which forecasts future traffic. A lot of that work is done to provide data for developers as they plan out their sites. We're wrapping up a trail wayfinding plan, expected to be done by the end of the month. We also provide trail counts and trail pavement condition data. This is just a snippet of what we have come up with in the trail wayfinding plan. So the communities can take this, use it to design signage for the trails within their communities. And then I mentioned trail pavement condition data. This is what we call our data bike, and it collects information about the roughness of the trails. So you may be familiar that some capital asset management planning is done with road pavement condition data. We're trying to do the same with trail pavement data so that staff can prioritize maintenance of trails to maximize their pavement lifespan. And then this is the data that comes from that bike. So you can see Marion's trails are in fairly good shape. 98% were in excellent, good, or fair condition. But obviously, Marion has a lot of newer trails, so the longer they're out there, the more important it is to maintain them. And then we also do all sorts of other project support type activities. Major one here would be Tower Terrace, design and right of way. We're administering the contract with Snyder to finalize the design and right of way acquisition for the whole corridor. And certainly seeking federal funding, discretionary grants, things like that for Tower Terrace. So just to wrap up, Tower Terrace is one of our major projects. We're starting on that trails plan, and we will be seeking lots of engagement from folks in Marion. And then those projects that are eligible for our next funding cycle that I mentioned, Tower Terrace, the Grand Avenue Trail, and the Highway 13 pedestrian crossing. Happy to take any questions about the MPO.
Well, could you go back? I'm sorry. Could you go back to that Highway 13 pedestrian crossing? Where is that?
Where?
Yeah.
North of 29th.
Okay.
So that's something that Marion staff has identified as a need and has made its way kind of through this funnel to be eligible for federal funding.
Yeah, just to help clarify a little bit, so it'd be somewhere north of 151, east of 13. That area is segmented off with the interstate system. And so we have pedestrians that are crossing that should not be.
Right, we've talked about that, but I guess I didn't realize that we had a project actually.
Yeah, so
Submitted.
we at least have it in there so that we can apply for it, because to us, that's a need that we need to get that.
Yeah, it's been a need for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions for Liz? Go ahead.
Can you go back to the trails signage? So my understanding that you've designed those and then you use those, a community can replicate those so that they all match, so
Yep.
that we're all like consistent for the whole metro trail system. Is that how we're doing that?
Perfect.
So then if there's a new intersection or spaces, like whether it's the new CMAR portion of the trail, is that in the plan? Is finished, this wayfinding along there? Or I know we have that new connector in Marion where it came in from Leninger and it's connecting at the Boysen Trail. And I've walked it a few times, and people be like, how do I get to how do I get to, this trail or that? And I figured there's probably eventually going to be a sign there at that T intersection. Is that then the municipalities grab one of these and create that and add it?
Exactly.
Is that how we do it? Okay.
Anyone else? Well, you've never met Grant, but it's Grant.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for joining us. This is a warm up for Thursday. So one of the things, if you can go back to that depiction of the different planet, yeah, that's the one. One of the things I just want to comment for the listening audience's benefit. And Liz, I want to applaud you and Hillary and the interns that have been of service to you during the summers over the last several years. And also, I need to give a shout out to the TTAC, the Traffic Technical Advisory Committee, as well, which has the engineering resources, taking a look at the total project portfolio. This is a substantial amount of work, and it has two regulatory overlays. One is federal Department of Transportation requirements, but then obviously state DOT gets involved as well. And so not only is it the portfolio of local projects that are being funded and managed over many, many years, but it's the regulatory interface that Liz and the team are responsible for. So I just want to give a shout out for that work and just express my appreciation for that.
Yeah. Thank you for all the work you do. And this is one example, a successful example of how the region collaborates together, all the entities, all the communities work together on issues of common interest. And sometimes you have to, let another community, have their project be prioritized, and then they'll do that in turn for you. I remember from my days on the MPO. So thank you for all that you do, you and your staff. And I do want to take the opportunity to recognize all the work that our own staff members put in to coordinate with the MPO. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And again, just great opportunities to collaborate and work together for the good of the whole region. And then also recognize Councilmember Harper. When he came on council, I quickly realized he should be replacing me on that MPO board. He has a lot more time and patience for it. So he's done a great job of representing our city on that board. So I hope you agree. I don't know, but
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that, not a lot of places have the understanding of regionalism and how beneficial that can be. So certainly makes our job easier. And I appreciate both your staff and your team for everything they do to make that happen.
Any other council members? Okay, well, thank you very much. If you have nothing else to add, we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Next item is a presentation on the fiscal year 26-27 general property and limited and liability insurance program. Hi.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Stacy V. Hill from the Finance Department here at the City of Marion. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Chris Faraday and Iris Varing here from PDCM. This marks Marion's 4th year working with PDCM as the city's insurance broker. And I'd like to take a moment to thank them for their partnership. In addition to helping us navigate our annual renewal, they provide valuable guidance and support throughout the year on insurance and risk management. We greatly appreciate their continued partnership. With that, I'll turn it over to Chris and Iris.
Thank you, Stacy, for that nice
Welcome.
intro. Welcome. Hello. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff. Good to see you all. Thank you for having us. So I am here with Chris today to talk a little bit about the city's commercial and property, et cetera, insurance renewal starting July 1st of this year. So a little bit on PDCM. We've talked about this in years past, but we as an agency offer several services in addition to procuring insurance, and that includes everything from safety and OSHA consulting to HR consulting, cyber consulting, risk consulting. So we're kind of a what I would call a full service turnkey agency in addition to getting insurance. It's our pleasure to serve you. We've got a team backing what we provide here to the city, decades of municipal insurance, bless you, municipal insurance coverage, some account managers and claims advocacy folks behind us that do a lot of work behind the scenes and help along in that way. I want to talk a little bit about influences and the landscape that we are looking at here from an insurance perspective, really in the past year and looking out on the runway. From a financial, administrative, and risk management side of things, really the key is looking long range at your plans to make sure you're not missing anything and we're not missing anything. In doing that, you want to manage the responsibilities administratively, and you guys do a great job of that, really being what I would call hands-on in claims management and claims handling. That's just an example of really taking that administrative feature. And finally, at the risk management loss control level, I always say that insurance is risk and risk is money. So when you look at that landscape, you want to manage those losses and those elements, because it will cost you money eventually if you hit the wall from a sustainability perspective. So from the influences side of things, that's kind of almost a three-pronged approach. So when we take that and look at emerging risks for municipalities here in 2026, we really see 4 things that are biggest on our what we call radar. Cybersecurity threats being probably number 1, and really fostering and supporting that is the artificial intelligence that's happening. So these threat actors are getting very, very savvy, and they are using video and voice. And when you hear and see some of the claims that we get, it is understandable to see why that's happening. So a good cybersecurity focus helps avoid that, and good coverage helps manage that. So cybersecurity is something that we really are keeping on the landscape radar. The other thing that's impacting property is weather. Nobody needs to talk a lot about that. Our April hailstorms and weather over these past years, the derecho that we faced here in this community a few years ago really impacted rates for us here in Iowa, and still are impacting rates. Chris has a much more eloquent way of saying this, but we had a very small window here in the spring where we thought we were going to see a lot more relief on property rates. I'd say it was about a 25-day window before the April hailstorm hit in Blackhawk County, where we were able to get some actual reduction in property rates. We are seeing a silver lining. We're seeing better than 20% increases like we saw here a few years ago. But we still have weather impacts here in the Midwest that's impacting property. Globally or US-wide, those weather impacts do have an influence on our rates here in Iowa, but Midwest Iowa has a good problem of its own with the convective wind issues, tornadoes, hail, and derecho, as we call it. Workforce challenges, talent challenges. We're seeing that across clients too. It's hard to find people that meet your what I would call culture, as well as have the skills and talents that you're looking for. So hiring folks continues to be a challenge. A lot of our clients that we see in municipalities that we see have vacant positions. So that is something of an HR issue and certainly impacts the work and overall path forward with an organization as well. Finally, liability and litigation trends, from everything nuclear verdicts that we're seeing to litigation funding. Companies actually go out and fund litigation for folks. It's kind of a new version, I would call, of ambulance chasing in a way, but that definitely impacts our liability coverages because we're seeing much higher verdicts across some of the areas, particularly professional, some namely related to some trademark issues, but also in law enforcement litigation or law enforcement in what I would call liability, as well as just other general liability issues. So to talk a little bit about the city now, a quick view on historical loss there. Claims pretty steady, and costs for those claims steady to slightly rising. With that said, the light green bars are what we call reserve costs, not yet spent yet, may not be spent. But looking at the dark green lines, steady to slightly increasing. So management of claims holding pretty steady. We like to see that. And here is what I call the meat and the potatoes of the whole slide. In general, what we're looking at last year to this year, just over about a 2% increase overall, just under 14,000 for a change. I will pull your attention to property. So that's probably one of our biggest increases, at just over a $10,000 increase. We'll talk about that in a second. With all of that said about weather, we were still able to hold this fairly steady because we do have a larger property value this year than last year. Otherwise, some of the bigger hitters, general liability, took a little bit of a % increase, but got some back on the auto liability as well. So overall, good increase, good renewal. Wanted to talk briefly about the liability structure. So we talk about liability being a key piece on that landscape. One thing we want to also share with you, excess liability coverage, very important piece of what we call package of insurance. So the city has a $9 million limit on the excess liability piece, and that sits over and above those coverages in the green. So general liability, auto, law enforcement, public officials, and employment practices. In effect, this gives you a column of coverage. So not only the 2 million underlying limit, but gets you in excess of 9 for any major claim that might, what we call, pierce that excess liability umbrella. Hopefully we will never have to use that, but it's there as needed. We like having that, given that what I would call the social engineering, the nuclear verdict type events that we're seeing out there. Lastly, want to touch a bit on that property being such a key element of the renewal. Total insured value is just north of 142 million. So that's everything, all buildings, all structures that the city has in place. Last year, our total insured value was about 135, I believe. Yeah, 139. So we're above last year on total insured value, but know that with all of the underlying elements, that total insured value blanket allows coverage in the case of multiple buildings being impacted by a claim. So there is some room in there as well. We like to keep those values updated. The carriers like keeping those values updated. So if there is a total loss, that you've got plenty of coverage in place, and the carrier knows that, there's no question in the end. So I know that's very fast and very succinct and put together, but questions, thoughts, comments?
Thank you. Question? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so once you get into your 4th year, that tells me you should have a pretty good feel for the city of Marion, its risk, its areas of concern. So after going into year 4, is there still an area that you would have, say there's still a concern about, that maybe a hole needs plugged or additional coverage is needed? So is there something there that's still if you could still tweak one thing in the coverage, is there anything out there that is missing?
I think I'll kind of defer to Chris on this. I'd like to see a little bit of pollution coverage, but
Pollution,
a little bit of pollution coverage.
okay?
But a bit of my background on the environmental side, it's something to consider. It's not something that I would say is overly critical, but it would kind of round out a little bit of some things just from the transportation side of things, chemical storage, that type of element. But I wouldn't say that's an overly critical piece, but something to consider in the future.
Okay.
I defer to Chris maybe on that
Thank you.
question.
Yeah,
Well,
I think that's a great point. Thanks, Council. Chris Faraday, PDCM Insurance, and I've been here along with Iris for the last 4 years. Thanks for allowing her to present today. She is in communication with your team on a daily basis. And so I thought, given that and her relationship with your team, it would be great to have her speak. So thank you for that. In support of that, I think we talked about the emerging areas. This is with any city. So the risks around some of our cyber protocols continue to be a challenge. I know Terrell has done a fantastic job, but they're changing quicker than we can respond sometimes in communities. So when we talk about the training that we're doing, we're supporting the work that the city of Marion's doing, but I think that's every business, right? That's not just a city of Marion thing. No matter where you work, we're all changing with our MFA requirements. Some companies are going to biometrics. So that risk, and not only the risk, but creeping into how we make payment systems, how we clarify things, those are some significant issues that continue to happen. But I think you're addressing it. It just, this landscape moves really quickly. The threat actors are quicker than us, right? That's their day-to-day basis to be nefarious. And I think the city's done a nice job of responding to that. I would say one of the downsides of the derecho is that you had a lot of work to do to bring your facilities to where they are now. One of the best parts is that post that period, I think you've got excellent facility and facility management. And I think in conjunction with working with your legal team, we've done a lot of work together to kind of tighten up how we're handling potential exposure. So rather than not having the right type of contractual wording with our vendors, we've really worked and done some things there. So by and large, it's been a continued partnership. That's why our team is on so much with your team every day. I think the city of Marion is a really vibrant community. And I know that last year at this point, I talked about the sun's coming out a little bit behind this. We're building this plan right now to where I think we're going to have a lot more flexibility in the coming years. And that's something that we're really pleased with.
and I'll throw out there too, in my daily work with the team, Chris talks about the vibrancy, a very proactive team as well. So they're constantly looking at the horizon and looking at what do we need to talk about, what do we need to look at. And so I'll commend them for all of their work as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we budgeted, what we had budgeted for an overall increase, but I think the overall increase in this was right at 2%. And so to me, given what we've been seeing for the past couple of years on property coverage, we've seen that on our homeowners policies overall with all the coverage we have, that seems pretty reasonable.
So just to jump in there, we had actually budgeted a 10% increase.
Did we?
Yep.
Ooh,
yep.
Very nice.
Great, go ahead.
If we could back up to the liability coverage slide, I think it was that's it. I just wanted to make sure I was interpreting this right. Using auto liability. So there's coverage there for $2 million per occurrence. Does the excess liability, does that get applied if it's necessary to cover a shortfall within any one of those subcategories? Is that
correct? So
the structure?
Yeah, great question. It could also be termed umbrella liability. So
Okay.
that $9 million sits above each one of those individual coverage areas, effectively giving us $11 million to use in any one claim. And it does, once it gets above that $2 million. Now, one of the cool parts about ICAP is that if we'd had that $2 million claim, it refunds itself on the bottom side, but that $9 million will always be there to kind of give us excess protection should we have a more catastrophic event.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And I should just compliment Iris. You talked about during the weather risk profile that we have to be worried about in the Midwest. You talked about convective weather. Are you going to be on WWL weather sometime?
I agree with your grip because I've never heard that term before. And I think I was watching one of the severe weather things on TV and they talk about the convective storms. And I've never heard that, but
I was
I don't think
enthused.
that'll be my calling, but.
Yeah, I was
good to know.
enthused. Way to go.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for coming in.
Thank
I would add one last thing if I may, Mayor, and I promise I'll be really brief.
No, go
We have
ahead.
an incredible team here. We work with public entities all across the state of Iowa. And I hear and continue to hear from our team that the city of Marion are the type of people they love to work with. So I just want to acknowledge the team that.
Thanks for
put in
sharing
here.
that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks very
I
much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have an update on the Aquatic Center project. Director Stashelm.
Mayor, City Council, as part of our monthly commitment, I'm here to provide an update regarding the Aquatic Center project. We did have a steering committee meeting last Monday, June 8th, in which we talked about two things within the three tracks that you see there. It was two-part, which was really we looked at the existing Aquatic Center concept from a review standpoint, and then we also from the second part, we looked at the draft Willowwood assessment that really tells a story of the existing life for Willowwood and how we can prolong that and for a replacement of it. Just as a reminder, this is the existing Aquatic Center plan that was proposed last year with a total surface water of 27,000 square feet. This was a regional pool. We looked at this plan from a refinement standpoint of how we can make that more community based. And this is really what we came up with working with the priorities that came from the steering committee. Within this plan, you'll see two bodies of water, a lazy river that was a high priority within the committee that is the same as what was proposed. And then we took the other bodies of water and combined them into one. We have a zero entry to 3 feet shallow end. That's more kid friendly. Getting into lap lanes, that's going to be more recreational style, showing 3 lap lanes, a deep end there. And then we also have proposed the water slides going into the lazy river, and then a phased option for another slide that is being master planned, but could be a future phase as part of that. The other additions would be centralizing the building units under one roof versus having multiple buildings, which helps from the cost perspective. Some of the feedback that came back from the steering committee was just seeing a little bit more separation from the children's area from where you get to the lap lanes. There's about 13 feet difference between the circle area to that corner. They were talking about pivoting that to have a little bit more of a distance. And then also just getting placements for seating, understanding where the seating comes to play. And then there was also concerns on how deep the deep end was towards possibly expanding that to bring some shallow water to the lap lanes. The committee was pretty favorable of this plan. We would bring this plan back in July to the next meeting to show those updates and also bring forward some cost estimates based on this square footage. Any questions on this plan before we move on to the draft assessment?
Go ahead.
Seth, just, looking at the prior design and just doing a general visual comparison of this design simplification, I think was really attractive in my view. And hopefully as you then work it down through cost estimations, we see a good realization of cost efficiency for this kind of design. But I like this. I like I guess it's combining some elements as well as it's simplifying the overall approach. So good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Seth, could you define, I think the squigglies that are in black, so the lower right, those are, if you're calling future slides?
So the lower right would be proposed water slides, which would be a tube slide and a body slide,
Okay,
as shown. And then on the upper left is a future racer slide that could be phased in. And the reason for it is it runs out into a body, so there's no real additional bodies of water that can be included. So if 10 years down the road, we say, hey, we want to include another feature to help bring people through the doors, that is another option.
so the slides in the lower right corner will be included?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other comments right now, or go ahead, Sarah?
So Seth, we're clarifying that really the plan right now is to focus on Willowwood as a revamp.
So this would be the existing plan at Munir. So
Existing plan at Munir, and then Willowwood, we're still deciding what's about to happen with
yes,
that.
and yep, and I'll have that part 2 here for Willowwood.
We're ahead of it.
For the Willowwood assessment, we received the draft assessment. We'll have the final published and be able to send it out to council and the steering committee. But from this assessment, they looked at the entire facility, and there's 3 areas of concern, which was the lap pool, specifically the deep end, the pool piping, and then the filter building. In the basin, the lap pool basin within the deep end, we do have spalling in the concrete that's really making the concrete like a sponge. Even though that condition is shown in the deep end, that condition exists throughout the whole lap pool. It's just more advanced within the deep end. For the longevity repair for this would be to tear out the entire deep end and to re-pour that deep end for that repair. This is of concern because this can cause major leaks within the basin. And for us to have a functioning pool would need to be repaired if it does increase in damage. So for the mechanical filtration system, we did do pressure testing. We do not have leaks within the piping, but due to the nature of material and the age, it is expected that this is a high risk item. High risk in which to be able to replace some of this piping, we would have to tear out decking, tear out infrastructure to make that proper repair. One item that was called out was the inlets there. This is in the bottom of the filter room that they're calling out just because of the material that the range is 0 to 5 years could be expected. And then the last item to call out was some of the settling within the filter building. You could see the large crack on the wall that extends through the flooring. That is something that we'll need to continue to monitor in the future to make sure it doesn't worsen. But this is from settling. This could be from multiple reasons, from either groundwater underneath or from past leaks from the facility. But there has been some settling within that filter building that's made some cracking occurred. All 3 of those items are concerns that to extend the longevity would need to be addressed. I am showing here a table of the magnitude of cost. This really shows the options for Willowwood. For ongoing repairs, we can expect and continue to expect to spend tens to hundred thousands for repairs, from pool paintings to some of those pump replacements, things that come into the bathhouse. For long-term corrections, everything that was on that previous table, if we wanted to make corrections to get longevity of 15 years to 20 years, to make that correction, we would expect $5 to $8 million. If we were doing a full replacement, which would be replacing the entire body of water with some bathhouse improvements, but keeping the character of Willowwood, we would expect $7 to $10 million. And then we've talked briefly at the last meeting for a modern neighborhood facility. That's with doing a full replacement, but bringing in things such as lazy river or water slides, but keeping it to the 12 to 14,000 square feet as a neighborhood pool would be between 11 and 15 million. And then if we were to do a full demo and replace it with a neighborhood park, as suggested from last year, where we could expect 5 to 7 million for that development. For next steps, we will be coming back to the steering committee in July with that aquatic center concept based on the feedback, doing some refinement work. From that refinement work, we'll also have cost estimates, and then we'll be able to extend that table that was just presented with some additional options for aquatic center site if we were to move forward with those. Any questions?
Questions for Seth? No? Okay, thanks, Seth. Next item is a discussion on the draft Uptown Parking Management Consultant request for proposal. Nicole.
Good afternoon, council and mayor. So staff has been working on the request for proposal for the parking management consultant. And we wanted to share the scope boundary as well as the scope of services with you and gain any feedback as we work to finalize the document. So the recommended scope boundary as shown on the screen is 5th Avenue to 8th Avenue and 7th Street to 15th Street. This is our standard uptown boundary for when we're looking at the uptown for plans, studies, and construction projects. So looking kind of at the purpose of this effort. So Uptown's commercial and residential activity has increased over the past decade. That shows us that Marion is doing something right. Our Uptown area has seen a lot of growth. In the past, we didn't need to manage our parking assets, but again, with that increase in activity, we are now looking at needing to manage our asset there for the parking. This effort is not a redo of the 2023 Uptown Parking Study, but it builds upon it. This is the next step. The Uptown Parking Study focused on the what, the where, and a generalized how. So the what with that was to determine if Uptown was kind of short in the number of parking stalls we have up there, or if it was an insufficient use of our parking inventory. The second one being the case in our situation. Within the study, the where and that general how, parking study focused on documenting existing conditions, looking at the current utilization of the parking, and then establishing those general strategies that are at the back of the plan. And those are the things that the Uptown Parking Implementation Task Force has been kind of working through. Councilmember Uniman, since he's not here today, he did provide some feedback. One comment he did make was wanting to ensure that our consultant that we're looking at, and that is very clear as to the purpose of this effort and the difference between that and our previous study. So as mentioned, our current Uptown parking study was the what, where with the generalized how. The parking and management consultant we're going to be looking to bring on board will build upon the strategies at the back of the study and focus on the when and the detailed how approach. So the consultant will focus on providing data that lays out trigger points for when to be implementing those strategies, as well as that how-to phasing for those strategies. Right now, those strategies say time restrictions, looking at where should employees park, those things, but it doesn't exactly tell us those trigger points and when we need to be implementing them. We're going to also have them look not only at current inventory, but to help us prepare for growth over the next 5 to 10 years. So starting with kind of that scope of services, and I'm going to keep this pretty high level, the full list was within the memo. So the consultant will review existing studies. This includes, again, starting off with that 2023 Uptown Parking Study, as well as our wayfinding master plan and the Uptown master plan. The Uptown Parking Implementation Task Force, so UPIT, will serve as the steering committee during this effort. Similar to the Uptown Parking Study, we're also going to have them collect data regarding parking inventory, distribution, and utilization. Even though we had that data collected back in 2022 during our first study, it's important to understand the differences and any parking redistribution and shift in utilization. We've had a few things happen over the past 3 years since that study was adopted. We've now got the Central Plaza in full swing. We've got our parking lot identifiers for the city lots up. And then we're gonna have three apartment buildings come online towards the end of summer, early fall. So it's important to be utilizing the data we've already have and then seeing what those trends are in shifts. We're also going to be asking them to look at information gathering from public engagement. That public engagement for this case will include stakeholder focus groups, so uptown businesses and residents. We'll have that standard public open house and then a midpoint presentation to council. So looking at the data analysis, as we kind of walk through these scope of services, again, we'll have them identify any of those shifts in parking distribution and utilization. We're gonna have them look at the turnover rate, combining that with the value of a parking stall. That information will help inform us on time restrictions. Where does it make sense to have a 2-hour versus a 4 or 8 hour, or loading zones? And then looking at pedestrian mobility. So making sure that our ADA spots are where they should be located. Does it make sense to have them kind of, like I said, in their current locations, or do they need to be shifted? Looking at the evaluation and development of the document, we again want them to give us parking management recommendations that detail out the how, so those trigger points, and then the when. That way we can strategically kind of implement those strategies within our current study. To ensure the data and trigger points, to ensure we have all the data and trigger points for all sorts of methods related to parking management. That does include, and I want to state first that this is not a first option that we would look at, but it would include having the information regarding paid parking versus like a permit program, and then including that how-to guide for if and when our community is ready to take that step to move from that free parking to paid parking. We also want them to provide us with future policy recommendations, including any code amendments, as well as the triggers for when those policy recommendations or code amendments should be considered for implementing. As mentioned previously, we want them to look 5 to 10 years out. This does include looking at potential future sites for acquisition or even parking expansion. Our uptown area, it's a set area, but we also know with the activity we have, we need to also be considering any potential growth. And so what does that look like? And prior to any implementation of these future strategies from our current parking study based on the parking management consultant recommendations, which again, we're looking to have those data-driven trigger points for the when and how. We'll have discussions in front of council with you to determine how best to proceed, and anything that involves capital improvements or budget would follow that standard process we have in place. So deliverables are pretty standard for planning documents, but a few that I want to highlight that we're going to be asking them to provide kind of a highlight paragraph throughout the process that we can pass along to you as council, but also having like the in focus or up to the public, just so everybody knows where we are in this process, but also that midpoint presentation to council. That way they can inform you, and we can discuss the findings that they're collecting as they move through the evaluation of the parking management. Our selection committee is an 8-member RFP selection committee. Includes a variety of staff as well as the Uptown Main Street Director, Lacey, and then one of our UPIT members, Tim. And for a timeline, we've completed the draft RFP. We're here today reviewing the scope of services with you. We are on track to have this issued July 1st. This puts us in a good spot for having a consultant on board in early September, which aligns with data collection for that standard kind of fall business operation that we have in Uptown. School's back in session. It's good weather out before the holiday rush happens. So it gives us that good kind of standard setting and baseline for parking. Questions?
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Nicole, based on our experience with the first study, and of course, we had to delay that for probably a total of 3 years because of the pandemic and everything else that went on in the 20 through 23. Do you have an idea, if we have this consultant on board, say early September, do you have a feel for maybe how long it would take before he would have his final report?
Yeah, we're anticipating a 6 to 9 month
6 to 9?
effort.
Okay.
Okay. Grant, go ahead.
That was my question.
Oh. Sarah, do you have something? Go ahead, Will.
So you talk about starting in September to get normal feel for parking. Are they going to also look at events like the fall market and Christmas in the park to see how the parking is for the large events, so they understand how that works within the city?
Typically with parking studies or parking management, they're looking at the standard operation of the area and not the large events that draw in the thousands of people. With the events, it's typically known that there's going to be a lot of people, parking's going to be a little harder than normal. And so the standard is to not necessarily look at events. Sometimes they'll provide some recommendations, but it's not something that's highly focused on.
Sure. My only thought for that is when you have the larger events and you have the overflow parking, it would show them where folks are going for the overflow parking. So for future maybe expansion of parking lots or acquisitions for parking lots, it kind of shows that dynamic when there's a large event. That was part of my thought on it.
Any other questions? Thank you, Nicole. This brings us to the review of the agenda. 2 items are marked for discussion, both on page 4. First one is A11, Brian.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is our proposal for the hotel motel award of our grant program specifically out of our hotel motel budget. So our hotel motel budget for fiscal 27 is made up of our parks programs, our contributions to our partners, Chamber and Uptown, among some other things like our Holiday Lights program. So this is specifically the grant program for our nonprofits to apply for their initiatives, their events, and their projects. And so the budget for fiscal year 27 was $50,000, and we had 10 applications this year. Requests is up this year from 114,000 to 134,000 with the $50,000 budgeted. So there is a review committee that scores these applications. That's made up of 5 members. That's two staff members, 2 residents, and our council representative, so council member Sarah Mentor. And so here are the proposed allocations. And so there's what was awarded last year, what they requested, and then the recommendation for the awards. And so it was certainly a tough process for the committee, and this is what the recommendation was on the right-hand side, how the 50,000 was allocated. So I just want to open up for any comments, any questions about the process.
Do you want me to add to that, Mayor?
Go ahead, yeah.
It was really tough, and the staff did, you did a great job of a scoring mechanism and looking at everything from attendees to, I think the thing that stood out with me was really the budgets and because one of the questions is sustainability, like how we rank them. And some of the applicants were really pretty thorough in their budgets and their plans and other sources of revenue besides just this. I think anybody applying for a grant understands that, you need to have a lot of different factors, a lot of different incomes. And so some of them were just really clearly more thought out with that, which played a big part of, I think, the decisions the committee had in the conversations. So I'm happy to also answer questions along with.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the two that received zero funds, I guess, any detail on that?
Yeah, the one, so we were just talking about this. So for example, the Indian Creek Nature Center, the Barn to Farm, while everybody really likes the project, it impacts 50 people. It's a very limited guest list. I think the feedback would be to them to how to find an event to participate in that encompasses a larger group of potential attendees instead of it being such a limited number of people, because that's part of it, impact. And the Infernal Soccer Club, I think there was an outreach to how else can we maybe help them right now, because there was a lot of unanswered questions and that they were unable to answer, which was where are they going to, there's a lot of agreements, there's nowhere they're going to practice or where can they be, the budget there was no budget. It's almost like they were a year ahead of them. They were almost a year ahead of a request. And this was more of the launching pad of the money rather than a way to bring in a whole bucket of funding to help that potentially happen. So that was really the reason between those two that there was zero out of the request.
Any other comments? Okay, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Next is a resolution amending the schedule of fees.
Hello again, Mayor and City Council.
Hello.
I wanted to briefly bring back the proposed schedule of fees amendment. Council reviewed the proposed changes at the June 2nd work session, and the resolution is currently scheduled for consideration on the June 18th consent agenda. Since council's had some time to review the information and consider the feedback received, we wanted to take a moment tonight to see if there were any remaining questions for staff or discussion items before it returns for approval.
Anyone? Go ahead, Grant.
So I think it was last week, Chief, you and I had a conversation about the inspection fees for commercial properties. And by the way, I think I should just say thanks for the comprehensive elements of consideration that you've brought into thinking about a commercial inspection fee. It certainly is much more complex consideration than what I was giving it at face value. So I was reflecting on the fact that right now we don't have that initial fee, and we're coming out of the gate with a $300 fee. And based on some other similar kinds of fee-related activities that we've contemplated over the last several years, I would like us to consider coming out of the gate with that being $150 fee, and knowing full well that, Chief, you and your team are going to be evaluating the true labor complement and the cost tracking necessities that underpin this program. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not opposed to a fee, but I am just thinking that it's a little aggressive while we're still in a data collection process to maybe say have a higher order charge. So I'm recommending that we come out with that being 150 while that analysis goes on.
Anyone else? Other questions? We can't. We can't give direction based on one person's.
Right.
But
I
if it's your
understand that.
opinion, you're certainly entitled to express your opinion. There has to be other consensus on that among other council members to constitute a direction to the staff to do something different. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so I went back and looked at the other information that the chief sent us after our last meeting, which I appreciate. So one of the questions I always ask when we're talking about fees or we're in this arena is I think we ought to be somewhat comparative to the region, you know, to what is Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, and Robbins doing. In this area, by just going to a fee, we're actually quite different than Cedar Rapids, because with what you sent us, Cedar Rapids initial inspection fee is $150 an hour. To me, that's maybe somewhat fair from the standpoint of if you're a small business, that ought to be a smaller amount of time. If you're a larger business with a bigger building, it's going to take more time. So to me, that to me always makes sense, that if you got a larger building that's more complex, you know, and it takes more time, there ought to be a higher fee for that. I also feel down the road, and I know we talked about whether or not we should give churches and nonprofits a break. That's a future discussion. But the one question I would have, so anyway, to Grant's point, as far as doing something out of the block, you know, jumping from 0 to 300, you know, that's kind of, and we're also going to be working on the next year, on time management and tracking our time for inspections. Is that correct?
We're going to be working in the software system to see if that can be done. Currently, it is not able to be done.
So that's another piece of element that down the road might be able to add to this. So coming out of the blocks, going from 0 to 300, I would tend to lean with Grant 150 is at least doing something out of the blocks. But my question is, we're doing a zero fee for the first reinspection. So what was your thinking on why it's a 0 fee for the first reinspection, and what percentage of the time do you have to go back for reinspections?
I don't have the data to share with you how often we're going back on a second inspection. But the methodology is that always with every inspection, if we identify items, there's always an educational component. It's not just that there's a code violation, it's understanding the why behind it. And so by going back to address those items, we don't want that after those items have been addressed, it's not intended to be a punitive component. But if there continues to be delays in getting those code violations remediated, that's where the additional costs would kick in.
Yeah, I would, if I'm looking at how we compare to a lot of the other cities, if we add another inspection fee, that'll make us different from some of the other cities. But our reinspection fees, again, if we look at how we can modify things down the road, seem to be somewhat lenient compared to what some of the other cities do. And I feel that ought to be a little more punitive. If you got to continue going back, you know, reinspection fees on the second, third, and fourth should be more punitive. And I think you're taking it a little easy on them with some of the reinspection fees. So just something to think about down the road. But you know, to answer the question, 300, going from 0 to 300, I'd be fine taking something, at least 150 out of the block. That might take some of the smaller businesses, make it easier on some of the smaller businesses until we have maybe some more information or time management.
Go ahead.
I concur with both of you on that, just in the fact that I don't think I really understand the cost at this point. I'd like to get a better understanding of that, and that takes somebody not with Grant's level of involvement on a spreadsheet to explain that to me. But I always feel like it's easier, it's going to be hard to go down. And I think that's a little bit of the public perception is if we start at 300 and then we make an adjustment. I've heard this from the people who've reached out with concerns about it, is they're like, well, even if we redo it, it's probably not going to go down from here. It's probably only going to go up. So I think there's a thought that if we start at 300, this is only the beginning and it's going to go up. Whereas if we can ease into it at a lower amount, let's say 150, I think that's where Cedar Rapids is. But again, I don't have a good grasp of the overall budget. That at least is where, if we do have to inch up, it doesn't feel like it was such a big jump that goes up after an assessment. That's all I had.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. You know, I've talked with a few small business owners this week, in the uptown area along 7th, farther down along 7th Ave too. And I think, you know, I understand the need for these fees at a certain level. I know part of it is to help kind of, you know, a lot of the pressure right now falls on the residential taxpayer on these, but also I feel like a lot of our business owners are also Marion residents. So I agree. I mean, I've heard the same perspective that Sarah was talking about. Business owner I talked to also made the point like, well, this, if it ever changes, it's only going to go up. That's what happens with all our fees. So I think just starting a little bit lower, yeah, like Grant said, 150, 200, just to give that time as we're doing more research. And because I think, you know, the same business owner that brought up the only increasing also brought up, he's like, I have a very small office space. They're in and out of here in like 5 minutes. I think in that kind of unfairness he felt versus like a larger business that would take more time. So, you know, and Steve brought up a great point about the regional, we try to align with a lot of our other policies on what the region's doing. And I do think an hourly rate is more equitable. However, if we're going to do a flat rate, I think we start low, and then in the future we could decide to continue to increase to a higher flat rate, or switch over to an hourly rate while we kind of see how much time each type of building takes us. And then we can officially make kind of a more detailed decision then.
I want to give the chief a chance to, if you have any other perspective to add to that, or what was the thinking behind flat fee rather than the hourly? Starting with the 300 rather than being everything you've heard. Do you have anything that just inform us about or inform our collective decision making?
Thank you, Mayor. This is all great feedback. When we provided this presentation last fall, we knew this was new. This was based on a cost allocation study that was conducted a few years ago, very data informed. Finance worked with a consultant on a citywide cost allocation study. And so the costs or the background, Sarah, it was informed by the methodology at that time. And so building in the current personnel costs and programmatic costs are the background behind the costs to answer that. And so the strategy on cost recovery, you know, we're looking for that feedback from you as council. And so, you know, the 150 inspection fee and that cost recovery percentage, we're really working at your direction on that. So if that's something that you would like to see as as getting into that space and working towards cost recovery, absolutely. Again, the effort was, you know, based on the mix of property taxes being 80% single family residential and 20% commercial, trying to work towards reducing that subsidy by single family residential taxpayers on commercial fire inspections. And so still, even at 150, we are making progress, continuous improvement, if you will. We talk about that quite a bit. So we absolutely can do that. We're always going to evaluate our programs and look for areas of opportunity to be more efficient and effective. The time tracking piece is a tricky one right now. For us, we're going to work in that space. We have inspections that are commonly interrupted by our duty crews that are out there. And engine companies, they catch a call, they have to leave, they have to come back, schedule it. those disruptions, we're going to be looking at that closely as not only from a time tracking, but also from a customer service lens too. So, but very open to that. No concerns at all.
Thanks for sharing that. Go ahead, Will.
I'll just throw my 2 cents in too real quick. I seem to be in the minority here because I think 300 is okay to start off with, because as it shows right there, it's only 25% cost recovery. And the whole point of this is to take it off of the burden of the residential customers or residents, residential residents of the city versus commercial. But I do like the idea of in the future going towards the hourly type rate, like Steve was saying, because of the small businesses that it may only take 15 minutes to walk through or something, and versus hours at a larger business. So I think that's the route we should go. But I would be fine with it staying at the 300 to start because of the difference.
I'm curious, what was the logic to not go with an hourly?
Our software system that we just got.
It's purely
into.
that. It's purely.
Yeah, the effectiveness of tracking that. The other piece on the time tracking, I know recently we had conversations on the schools, larger facilities that would be more lengthy inspections, take a longer time to inspect. But the other factor behind the $300 relative to different sizes of the buildings, even though a building may be small, which is another factor between us and some of our comparables. Our intervals of inspection are either on a 1 year, 2 year, or a 3 year basis, depending upon the occupancy risk classification. So some of those larger facilities that are assemblies or institutions, or if they have a beer or liquor license, those are annual inspections because of the risk profile. The smaller mercantile type occupancies are on a lower risk profile and may only need an inspection once every 3 years. So the proportionate interval of that inspection and the cost would be different than in some of our comparables. But as we move into the future, this is all great feedback. We can continue to look at and bring back options as we move into the future. We're going to be looking at opportunities to make the program more efficient and effective as well.
Okay.
So, Mayor,
go ahead.
So just to share some information just for council as I reference, just the $300 is what is plugged into the fiscal year 27 for the revenue line item for fire. So I just wanted to share that piece of information.
Okay, in the adopted budget?
Yes, so in the budget that was just
okay.
adopted in April. Yeah.
Okay. That change anybody's? Or should
It shouldn't. It's just a data point.
Okay.
When you guys adopt the budget, the expense side is the most important. We do put in estimates for revenue. So that's why we want to let you know. So I mean, we'll be able to explain it as we proceed in the fiscal year. So.
But it seems like we have at least 4 who would like to recommend the 150. We know where we'll stand. So anybody think differently from that? Okay.
All right. So then, Stacy, we'll have that prepared for Thursday. So we'll make the tweak in the resolution in your packet. So you'll have the new number in the resolution for Thursday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions on any other item on the agenda, whether it was marked or not? Anything needs to be discussed before Thursday? Not, this brings us to the conclusion of the work session. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you Thursday.